Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Chanukah. And I'm making a short video this morning. We did yesterday a nice piece of Daf Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, but we didn't complete Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. I'm going to do a relatively short video now to finish off Daf Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, and then hopefully later today we will do Kuf Mem Amud Aleph, and maybe a little bit more. I'm trying to push ahead so that we can catch back up to the Dirshhu schedule. So, we're here in Siman Reish and Aleph, and we've been discussing the proper placement of the Menorah. So, I'm going to go back in the Ramah, 3 lines from the top. Just going to read it through quickly. I'm not going to go through the Mishnah Berurah over here. But the, you know what, let's do 2 lines, the second line down near the beginning of the line. We'll just read from the beginning of the Ramah. Haga umiu bizman hazeh kulanu madlikin bifnim. The Ramah says nowadays we all light inside, and in Chutz La'aretz that's basically true. The basic minhag is to light inside, not to light outside by the door, and therefore the Ramah said ve'ein heker libnei rishos harabim klal. The Ramah was saying that at least in his times, people lit inside, and there really was no Parsume Nisa lechutz at all. We were not doing any Parsume Nisa to the Bnei Rishos Harabim. The Ramah is addressing a situation where, in his days, they lit inside, not by a window. They just lit inside. And ein heker l'bnei Rishos Harabim klal. And therefore, said the Ramah, ein lachish kol kachim ein madlikin b'tefach hasamach lepesach. We're lighting inside. The default would be still light by the door. And the Mishnah Berurah said the reason for that would be, even though you're not being mekayim any kind of Parsume Nisa by lighting by the door, because you're lighting inside, but you could still gain the milah of having the menorah on the left and the mezuzah on the right, so that when you go through the door, you're surrounded by mitzvahs. But, says the Ramah, you don't have to be so careful to make sure that the menorah is within a tefach of the door. The whole reason we had to be careful to have the menorah within a tefach of the door was because we were lighting outside, and if the menorah is removed too far away from the door, it doesn't look like it's your menorah. Maybe it's just a menorah outside of Rishos Harabim. But now that you're lighting inside, you're going to light by the door, it's not so important to keep it within a tefach of the door. But the Ramah said, Umikam Makaim, nevertheless, Haminig lahadlik batefach hasamach lapesach. And as it was explained by the Bir Halacha, what this means is, the Ramah said, it would be the minhag hanachain, it would be the best thing, and in the Darkei Moshe on the Torah, he says the medaktikim are careful to still put the menorah within the tefach of the door, k'bay b'yamehem, because that was the original takanas chazal when we were lighting outside by the door of ein l'shanos, and we shouldn't change it. However, we did see in the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Lamed Ches, we should remember that when the Ramah speaks about lighting by the door, that's only because, like the Ramah said in the beginning of the Haggah over here, that's dealing in a case where ein heker l'bnei Rishos Harabim klal. In a case where your mamish giving up on Parsume Nisa to the Bnei Rishos Harabim, and you're going to light inside, and only the people on the inside of the house are going to see it, so then light by the door to gain the milah of being mesubav b'mitzvahs between the mezuzah and the menorah, and the best way to do it is to keep the menorah within a tefach of the door. But, said the Mishnah Berurah, if you're in a situation, which nowadays is the prevalent situation, where you're not giving up on Parsume Nisa to the Rishos Harabim, you have a window facing the Rishos Harabim, and you could light in the window, so then obviously it's better to light by the window and gain Parsume Nisa to the Rishos Harabim than it is to light inside within a tefach of the door, where you only have Parsume Nisa for the people that are living inside, and you gain this mile of mesubav b'mitzvahs. Mesubav b'mitzvahs has nothing to do with Neres Chanukah. It's just a side benefit. So if you have a way to get Parsume Nisa for the Rishos Harabim, certainly you should get Parsume Nisa to Rishos Harabim. One example that I gave where I could see what the case of the Ramah is, you live in an apartment building on the 20th floor. So you live in an apartment building and your windows are way more than 20 amas off the karka of Rishus Harabim, so even if you light by the window, it's dubious that you're going to be mekayim any parsumei nisa to the bnei Rishus Harabim, because the ayin is not sholit. People don't look up more than 20 amas. That's why more than 20 amas off the ground, you're not yoitza. So in that case, it really doesn't seem that you have any ability to get parsumei nisa lechutz at all. So you're lighting inside. There's no benefit to lighting by the window because it's not parsumei nisa to the bnei Rishus Harabim. So then light by the doorway. Light by the doorway and gain the benefit of being mesubah b'mitzvahs. Continues the Ramah, third line down, end of the line. Ela imkein rabim b'nei abayis. However, the Ramah also says, if people are going to light by the door, and Kenai Nahara, you have a lot of menorahs to set up by the door, now you might end up with a mumble jumble of neris, and nobody's going to be able to tell how many neris were lit that night, and that's a problem. Ela imkein rabim b'nei abayis she'adav yoseh lahad lekalechad b'makom miyuchad mila'arev haneris b'yachad. In that case, says the Ramah, people should light in distinct areas so that you could tell which night of Chanukah it is, not that everybody should stick all their neris by the door. Ve'ein heker kamen neris badlikin. Nevertheless, says the Ramah, Yizaru, when we are choosing the placement of the menorah, we should take care. We should not put the Chanukah menorah in a place that we light neris all year long, because then you lose the heker that it's still l'tzarech mitzvah. Even though the whole heker that you're making is for the bnei abayis, and the bnei abayis know that this is a Chanukah menorah, still the Ramah says there should be some kind of heker that this is different than the neris of all year. Doesn't seem that we have this issue much nowadays. We have electric lights. People don't generally light neris all that much. When we light the neris Chanukah, we do it in a Chanukah menorah. So it doesn't seem that this applies to us much, at least nowadays. Okay, and now let's pick up more or less where we left off yesterday. Continues the Mechaber. Ubebeis HaKnesses, when we light the menorah in Shul, where are we supposed to place the menorah in Shul? Says the Mechaber, Manichai bekoisel daroim. We place the menorah alongside the southern wall of the Shul. Now, the next words over here in the Ramah say, Oy bidaroim ha-menorah, which would mean, or to the south of the menorah, which has no meaning. And the Mishnah Berurah says this is a Toyas Sefer. Really what it's supposed to say is, Kinerois ha-menorah, similar to the neros of the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. Now let's remember, in the Beis HaMikdash was really aligned the direct opposite of most of our shuls nowadays. Where we live in the Western Hemisphere, and Eretz Yisrael is to our east, and therefore our shuls are typically set up with the Aron HaKodesh being in the Mizrach. So when we come in, the front of the shul is the Mizrach. That's the Mizrach Vant. Since the front of the shul is the Mizrach, that means that the left of the shul is the west. The left of the shul is the north, and the right of the shul is the south. So, where is the Mechaber telling us to put the menorah? The Mechaber is telling us to put the menorah on the southern wall, which is going to be the right side wall of the shul when we come in. Now, that was not the case in the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash, the menorah was also on the south. But in the Beis HaMikdash, when you came in, the Mizrach was the back. The Kacheh was in the Ma'ariv. So when you came into the Heichel, the front, so to speak, of the Heichel was the west. The back was the east. And therefore, the southern wall was to your left. But the menorah was on the southern wall. So the same way the menorah was on the southern wall in the Beis HaMikdash, we placed the menorah on the southern wall in our shul when we set up the menorah for Chanukah. So that's what it means here. So again, the Mechaber said, Bebeis HaKnesses, in shul, where do we put the menorah? Manichai bekoisel daroim, we place it alongside the southern wall kineros ha-menorah, similar to the neros of the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash that were also put up by the southern wall. And how do we light the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses? Umisadron mimizrach lamayrav. We set up the neros going from the east to the west. Now, what this means is, you come into the shul, the southern wall of the shul is typically on the right. You set up the menorah alongside the southern wall. The one who lights the menorah goes behind the menorah, meaning he stands with his back to the southern wall and the menorah in front of him. And now he sets up the menorah in the same manner that he sets up his menorah at home. The lichtalach that you're going to light are going to be on the right side of the menorah. Now, if you're standing with your back to the southern wall of the shul with the menorah in front of you, that means that the mizrach, the Aron HaKodesh, and the Amid are to your right. So you're going to set up the lichtalach that you're lighting on the right side of the menorah, like you do at home, and you're going to light the menorah in the same manner as you do at home. You're going to light today's licht first, so you're going to start from the leftmost ner, tonight's ner, and then you're going to continue going to the right towards the mizrach, towards the Aron HaKodesh. Okay, umisadron mimizrach lamayrav, that's what it means here, umisadron mimizrach lamayrav. Let's take a look right now in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is katan lamed tes, ubebeis hakneses. This is how we light in the Beis HaKnesses, and the Chavetz Chaim puts in the words here, oy beveis hamedrash, or if it happens to be a Beis Medrash, that's how you light in the Beis Medrash. Ois katan mem bekaisel daroim. You place the menorah alongside the southern wall. Now the words of the Mechaber are be kaisel daroim, on the southern wall. Says the Mishnah Berurah, oy al hashulchan sha'omed eitzel called kaisel daroim. This could mean on the table that's alongside the southern wall. The rationale for this placement of the menorah is zecher lemenorah, as a zecher to the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, shemekayma b'Hamikdash b'darim, because as we said, the menorah in the Heichel was alongside the southern wall. Ois katan mem aleph, oy b'darim ha-menorah. That's the text that we have here in the Ramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah to a cipher, this is a textual error. V'tzarech loymar kineros ha-menorah. If you look at the word bid-daraim, the only difference between bid-daraim and kineros is 2 letters. Change the bays to 3 letters, I'm sorry. You have to change the bays to a kaf, the dalid to a nun, and the endemem to a saf, and you have kineros. So this was supposed to be kineros ha-menorah, not b'daraim ha-menorah. Ois katan mem beis, umesadron mimizrach lamayrav. And we set up the neros in the shul from the east, from the mizrach, that's like from the front of the shul, to the back of the shul, to the mayrav. Zeu gam kein menorah, says the Chavetz Chaim. This is also similar to the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. The haneros hayu musudarin b'Hamikdash bein mizrach lamayrav, because like I said, the menorah was located adjacent to the southern wall of the Heichel. And it was, the menorah ran, according to most Madi Amrim, the menorah ran parallel to the southern wall. So the line of the neros of the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, they were aligned mizrach to mayrav. That's the way, again, the door to the Heichel was in the mizrach, the kachikachim was in the mayrav, and that's the way the menorah was aligned, with the neros going from the mizrach to the mayrav. So too in shul, we set up the menorah in the same way. We set up the menorah parallel to the southern wall. Kain Yisader Gam Kain Neres Chanukah. That's the way we set up the Neres Chanukah in the shul. Now the Chavetz Chaim mentions a different minhag. V'da, you should know, the Yesh Maharishonim Desviraluhu. There are those Rishonim who take issue with this, and they hold the after HaMenorah Haisa Emedis B'Daraim. They say that even though it's true that the menorah certainly was located adjacent to the southern wall in the Beis Hamikdash, mikam makayim, nevertheless, it wasn't aligned from Mizrach to Ma'ariv, mikam makayim neiraseh hayu musudarin mitzafa nudarin. These Rishonim held that the menorah actually stood perpendicular to the southern wall, so that the neiros were not aligned Mizrach to Ma'ariv, rather they were aligned tzafan to darim. Umemela liditu, according to those Rishonim, gam neiros Chanukah yesh l'sada ba'ifin zeh. According to these Rishonim, you would set up the menorah in Shul in that manner. You would put the menorah adjacent to the southern wall, but you would turn the menorah perpendicular to the southern wall so that the neiros are aligned north to south, not east to west. And indeed, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'yesh b'kayim shenagu kain. There are places that have this minhag, ve'ein limchais bam, and we should not object to that minhag. If you see a place that has that minhag, we do not object. And he brings this down in the Sharet Tzion from the Magen Avram, shekasav shekalechad yitvais kiminhagay. Everybody should follow his minhag. Ve'ein limchais bam, t'yesh lehem amal lismach. Ois kat mem gimel lemayrav, and we are misader the licht from the Mizrach, from the east to the west, from the front of the Shul to the back of the Shul, explains to Chavetz Chaim, Vahamadlik, the one who's lighting the menorah, he stands, Achorav L'Darim, his back is to the southern wall, so he's standing between the southern wall and the menorah. Upanav L'Tzafai, which comes out that his face is facing north. Umaschil Miyaminoi, and he's misader the licht on the right side of the menorah, the same way you do at home. Shehu hanera samach la'aron hakodesh. So he's going to set up the menorah starting from the side of the menorah that's closer to the Aron HaKodesh, the east side of the menorah, on his right. V'shuv ma'aseh v'ha'ilach, and of course every night you're going to add another licht. So the first night he's going to start lighting the menorah using day one, the licht that's all the way to the right of the menorah, that's the one closest to the Aron Kodesh. The next night, he's going to add another licht to the left of that one. Umaskil mehasmali, and each night when he lights, he starts to light from the leftmost ner, that's tonight's ner, just like you do at home, and then you go to the right, upaina liyamina. And the Chavetz Chaim points us to Siman Tafrei Shayin Vav, where we're going to discuss this in greater detail. Ois Cotton Mem Dalid. No, we didn't do that yet. No. Okay, now let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. 2 lines to the bottom, beginning of the line. Umadlikin umevarchen. We light Chanukah licht in the Beis HaKnesses with a bracha. Umevarchen bebeis HaKnesses. We make a bracha on the lighting in Shul, mishum parsume nisa, because of parsume nisa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Katan Mem Dalid, umadlikin umavarchin. Now this is very interesting, because you're making a bracha essentially on the lighting of the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses, which is only a minhag. It's not a chiyuv. The chiyuv is ner ishu beisai. The chiyuv is to light at home. There is no chiyuv to light in the Beis HaKnesses. It's only a minhag. Says the Chavetz Chaim, after the Beis HaKnesses who rak minhaga, even though the lighting in the Beis HaKnesses is only a minhag, mikal mokim, nevertheless, mevarchen alav, you make a bracha on that lighting, k'moishe mevarchen al halal de Rosh Chodesh eina el minhag. Let's remember, we say halal every Rosh Chodesh, and that halal is only a minhag, and yet we make a bracha on it. Now the Gra brings a raya to the fact that we make a bracha on Rosh Chodesh, even though I think the minhag of the Gra himself in the end was not to make a bracha on Rosh Chodesh. But the Gra says, we know that we make a bracha on a kriyas halal that's only a minhag, because we say halal in Shul on Pesach night by Ma'ariv, when you make a bracha, even though that's only a minhag. The Ikar halal was niskan by the Seder al HaKois, not by Ma'ariv, and yet people make a bracha. So you make a bracha on halal by Rosh Chodesh, even though it's only a minhag. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan brings down that one of the reasons we make the bracha, because this is a little difficult. Obviously, there are a lot of minhagim that we don't make a bracha on. For example, we just learned Hilchos Sukkah, and we spoke about the minhag on Aviyim of Chabatas Ha'aravos, the minhag of Hishanis. We don't make a bracha on the minhag of Hishanis. So there are minhagim that we certainly do not make a bracha on. And why is it that on this minhag we make a bracha? So the Aruch HaShulchan gives a very compelling reason. The Aruch HaShulchan says there were definitely times where the only parsumei nisa of the Chanukah Menorah to the rabbim was in the Beis HaKnesses. Again, let's go back to the Ramah, who said that Bizmanenu, where everybody lights inside, what did the Ramah say? Bizman hazeh shekulanu madlikin bifnim ve'ein heker l'bnei rishus harabim klal. The Ramah was talking about a time where everybody lit inside the house, no windows, no nothing. So there was never any parsumei nisa in your lighting of the Chanukah Menorah for the rabbim. So where was there a parsumei nisa for the rabbim? By the lighting in the Beis HaKnesses. By the lighting in the Beis HaKnesses, over there you had a tzibur. So over there you had a parsumei nisa de rabbim. So the Aruch HaShulchan says that's a very compelling reason why you should make a bracha on the lighting in the Beis HaKnesses. He also brings down that very often there were guests. There were orchim, there were travelers, and they were yotze the mitzvah of adlakas neros by the lighting in the Beis HaKnesses. So you had to have a bracha. Continues the Mishnah Berurah. Im avel mispal be'erev Chanukah. We're going to see soon, I'll probably be in the next chair, that the time to light the Chanukah Menorah in the Shul was between Mincha and Ma'ariv. So now, the Chavetz Chaim says like this. Im avel mispal be'erev Chanukah. If the one who's going to be davening Ma'ariv for the Amud, the first night of Chanukah, is an Avel, and the minhag was that it's the Chazan who lights the Chanukah Menorah, so now you have the question of the Avel lighting the Chanukah Menorah in the Beis HaKnesses. Says the Mishnah Berurah, on the first night, Madlik Adam Achar Anerois, somebody else should light the Lichtalach, not the Avel. Why? Mishum she'echayanu de mavarchin oz, because on the first night you have to make a shechayanu, minkar, and that makes it very, very boilet, very recognizable, de'ez simcha hi latzibur, that this is a special simcha, it's a time of simcha, that's why you make a shechayanu. Vein kedai she'avel yadlikem, and that's not appropriate for an avel to do. Avel beveisa yachal around shechayanu, but certainly at home, an avel could make a shechayanu when he lights menorah on the first night. Aval shar arvis de Chanukah, but other nights of Chanukah b'ma'ariv, the ein mavarchet shechiyanu, yachala aval lahadlik ner Chanukah, the aval could certainly light the nearest Chanukah. Umispal la'aval b'Chanukah mincha u'ma'ariv, and the Chavetz Chaim says an aval could daven for the Yamid on Chanukah mincha and ma'ariv. He does not mention Shachris. Now the problem of Shachris is that there's halal by Shachris, and the Aval can't say halal for the Amud. So there's different minhagim, and there's different, actually it's interesting, the Mishnah Berurah seems to suggest different ways in different places. I'm not going to get into it right now, but there are those where the minhag is that an Aval doesn't daven on Chanukah for the Amud at all, and there are those places like here in Yeshiva Staten Island where the minhag is that the Aval does daven Shachris, but he walks away from the Amud by Hallel, and somebody else says Hallel, and he comes back after Hallel. Uvechamisha asa ba'av, so too on Tu ba'av, Ushvat, and Tu b'shvat, like ba'omer, the less howl. These are days when you don't say Tachnun, they're Yemei Simcha, but we don't say howl on these days. Ha'avel mispal Shachris gamkein, an Avel kedaven Shachris on those days. Ubechalamayid, they have the Kiyamtiv, but a Chalamayid, which is like a Yamtiv, Manati lepa'amim lahaniach ha'avel hispal mincha u'mayriv. The Chavetz Chaim says that he did at times restrain or not allow an aval to daven mincha ma'ariv for the Amid on Chalamayid. Let's now do the Ramah, 2 lines to the bottom, a little bit past the middle of the line. Haga, ve'ein adam yoytze b'neres shel Beis HaKnesses, you're not yoytze, the mitzvah of Neres Chanukah, with the lichtalach in Shul, v'tzarech lachzar ulahadlik beveisai, and you have to light again at home. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah over here. Mishnah Berurah is cut men. Hey, v'tzarech lachzar ulahadlik, you have to light again at home. Va'afilu hashliach tzibur, shebirech bebeis HaKnesses, even the Chazan, who lit the Menorah in the Shul, and he made a bracha on the Hadlaka, tzarech lachzar lahadlik bebeisai, he has to light again at home, the yeshriyav al kol echad lahadlik bebeisai. He has to light again, and he's going to make a bracha at home when he lights. But he can't make another shechiyanu. So if it's the first night, and he was the chazan in Shul, and he made 3 brachas, when he lit in Shul, when he goes home, he's going to light again to be B'kaim the mitzvah. Again, the Shul is only a minute. He has to go home and be B'kaim the mitzvah of Dirshhu Beisai. So when he gets home, he's going to make 2 brachas, but he can't make a shechiyanu. The reason he can't make a shechiyanu is because what's the bracha of shechiyanu? The bracha of shechiyanu is that I reached this milestone in the year. I reached this time of great simcha where I have the mitzvah of Neres Chanukah. You made that bracha when you made the shechiyanu to light the lichtalach in Shul. Let's remember, let's compare it to, let's say, sukkah and lulav. We said that if you build your sukkah within 30 days of sukkahs, really you can make a shechiyanu when you build the sukkah. But if you make a shechiyanu when you build the sukkah, then you don't make a shechiyanu on the yeshiva sukkah. Now you're going to make a shechiyanu on the first night of Yom Tov anyway, because you have to make a shechiyanu on the Yom Tov. But that shechiyanu will only go on the Yom Tov. It doesn't go on the sukkah, because you already made a shechiyanu on the sukkah when you built the sukkah. Same thing with the lulav. If you make a shechiyanu when you tie your lulav together on Erev Yom Tov, then the next day when you take the lulav for the first time, you don't make a shechiyanu, because you already made the shechiyanu on the lulav. So to here, while it's true that you weren't mekayim the mitzvah of hadlakas Neres Chanukah in Shul when you lit, but you made a shechiyanu on the arrival of Chanukah, so you can't make a shechiyanu at home. Unless when you're lighting at home, you're being mitzi your family members. If you're being mitzi your family members, so you have to be mitzi them in a shechiyanu. Since they need a shechiyanu, you could make a shechiyanu to be mitzi them. Okay? We're going to stop over here, so we're at the bottom line in the Ramah right before the word minhag. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe should send Yeshua's refuahs parnas and shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the B'yas Kol Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. And stay tuned. Hopefully there will be another share yet today on Daf Kuf Mem Amid Aleph. Be well.